let's discuss 10 moves I'm making in fantasy football today to try and propel myself towards that fantasy championship in my leagues. We're going to talk about playoff schedules with some buy sells, starts, sits, stashes, and cuts. A little bit of everything for some of y'all. And you can check out the time codes if you want to go to a specific section. I want to start off with cuts and stashes. Let's start off with players you can confidently cut. The waiver wire just happened. You can confidently cut the following names. And then there's two guys right after this we're going to talk about as stashes that I think have sneaky upside in the fantasy playoffs. So first things first, you can go ahead and, as sad as it is to say, you can go ahead and cut J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins was such a good fantasy pick this year. I was definitely all in on R.J. Harvey, so I didn't have much of him on my fantasy football teams, but he was a top 20 running back in fantasy football before this injury. Just consistency after consistency. Every time, like the first 5 weeks, he had 4 touchdowns. He was a great pick in fantasy football, but unfortunately, he's not going to be playing for the rest of the year. I think the quote was, if we make the Super Bowl, maybe we'll play him. So just cut him. There's no reason to keep him unless you're in a dynasty league. Let's talk about Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley wasn't even worth rostering if he was healthy. Well, breaking news. Unfortunately, he's out for the year with an injury himself. Michael Penix as well, out for the year himself. So this is more specifically for super flex leagues. You don't even need to keep him on IR. Just completely release him at this point. Nick Chubb, the reason I want you to confidently cut him is because he was already useless as a starter for the Houston Texans, but now his role is continually decreasing. He had 6 touches in week 10, 5 carries. In week 11, he had 5 touches. His snap percentages keep going down. Woody Marks is continually being featured, so you can cut him pretty easily. Jacory Krosky-Merritt, same exact thing. Unfortunately, without Jaden Daniels, without a healthy offense, without a defense that's competent, he has continually lost opportunities. He's been a part of a worse and worse offense, and his role just continually decreases. And each of the last 3 weeks, the rushing attempts and the total opportunities have gone down from 13 to 11 to 10. The snap share from 46-44 to 27%. Chris Rodriguez is the guy. You can totally cut him at this point, especially because he's on bye. Brashard Smith, same exact idea. We were hoping that maybe without Isaiah Pacheco, his role would grow. It hasn't. In fact, in the last couple of weeks, he's seen less opportunities than he did in week 7, for example. So he's someone you can move on from. Matthew Golden, who unfortunately was a player I thought had a lot of upside this year, but now that people are getting healthier and healthier outside of Tucker Kraft, there's just no role for him for a consistent fantasy producer. Christian Kirk, you can cut at this point. Keon Coleman wasn't even started last week. You couldn't even start him when they thought he was important to their offense. I don't know how you start him anymore moving forward. TJ Hawkinson, this offense, specifically the passing attack, has been really bad. He hasn't scored over 10 points in the last 5 weeks. I don't know when that's supposed to change. Last 4 weeks, excuse me. So you can cut him. David Njoku, same exact thing. He's just been far too inconsistent. Harold Fannin is also starting to take off. So those are the names that you can cut right now with confidence. And here are 2 names that I would like you to stash instead, if they're available. Starting off with one of my favorite rookies this year, Jaden Higgins. Now, Jaden Higgins is a name that has been definitely a little bit up and down. You saw some flashes from him in week 8 versus the San Francisco 49ers. That was the game where Nico Collins was injured, but he got into the end zone. But you're starting to see that snap percentage go up from 48 to 57 to 61%, 7 targets in back-to-back games. Now, unfortunately, those are back-to-back games where there was no CJ Stroud, so you really wanted to see that with CJ Stroud in the lineup. But even in this last game, again, you see that snap percentage for him continually going up each and every week since the Nico Collins return. And it's just great to see. He is clearly in their offense the second guy. You don't have to worry so much about Xavier Hutchinson. The Braxton Berrios usage is starting to completely fall away. So you love to see that he was second on the team in snaps, routes run, and in targets right behind Nico Collins. They clearly need another pass catcher to step up. And if they can stop targeting Dalton Schultz and target Jaden Higgins more, I think they'll have a better outcome. Second name I want you to stash everywhere, and I imagine in quite a few leagues he's available because he's on a bye this week, but I'm going to sell you on him, I promise. Let's talk about Chris Rodriguez. Told you to drop Jacory Krosky-Merritt earlier. Now I'm telling you to pick up Chris Rodriguez, who, by the way, in 2 of his last 3 games has averaged well over 5 yards per carry, even against a really tough Seattle defense, which is really tough to run against on the ground. Against Miami, he had 79 rushing yards, 16 touches, over 5 yards per carry. We love to see that. And more importantly, he completely took over the backfield. You barely saw Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. He led the way in snaps, had 16 touches to 10 for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. And if you want to visualize that, PFF does a great job doing that. You'll see Chris Rodriguez as this light blue color, dominating early downs, goal line, short yardage usage, and even more importantly, when you look at the playoff schedule for running backs, nobody has a better schedule than the Washington Commanders. They get the Giants, Eagles, and Cowboys. Those are all great games. We'll have to see how the Cowboys defense changes since the Quinnen Williams addition, because he has definitely improved that defense. But that's a name that I think is definitely worth stashing. Imagine if Jaden Daniels is back after the bye. I mean, he might be a startable name each and every week for you guys who are in a very difficult position. Okay, let's go ahead, and what I'd like to do next is I'd like to just completely highlight the best and worst playoff schedules at each position so you can plan accordingly. So let's start off with the running back spot. The best schedule for the playoffs for running backs, we've got the Commanders, we've got the Dolphins, we've got the Cardinals, Eagles, Patriots, and the Vikings, which means if you can go out and trade for an Aaron Jones, he's one of my favorite trade targets. I talked about this a couple weeks ago. Still feel the same exact way, even though the offense isn't good. He's clearly their guy. Jordan Mason is an afterthought. He gets Dallas and the New York Giants. The Patriot running backs, both Stevenson and Henderson, I love as buys. They have great matchups. The Jets is going to be an even better matchup as they continually don't have Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams. Saquon Barkley is going to be impossible to really trade for. The other actionable advice, again, is pick up Chris Rodriguez for free. And then if you can trade for Devon Achane, if you're out there and you're guaranteed locked and loaded #1 seed, and you know you're not going to have to worry about week 15, what if I told you Achane has Cincinnati and Tampa Bay to finish the year? Go out and trade for these guys. However, on the opposite side of the spectrum, the Detroit Lions schedule is not good. I wouldn't worry too much about Jahmyr Gibbs, but if you can get any value from David Montgomery after this week in particular, I think he's going to have a good week. Then you definitely try and sell him before the playoffs come. Same exact thing for a Jaylen Warren. I do not want to have Jaylen Warren in the playoffs. I don't want to have Breece Hall. James Cook, I'm not too worried about. But same thing with RJ Harvey. These type of guys, I would rather move off of my team. Before we continue, gotta let y'all know that there's a free feature on the Flock site called the My Teams feature. All you have to do to access it is sign up using my promo code LAND for a free account. It's one of the awesome free features out there, including some expert consensus rankings, but you can see where your league stands, where you stand within your league. Check that out in the pinned comments below if you want to have a look at it. Okay, let's go to the wide receiver position. The best schedule in the playoffs still is the Minnesota Vikings. So they've got Dallas, New York, and Detroit. Now, obviously, look, you can look at this two ways. You can look at this as a buy low if you think JJ McCarthy is going to improve. Most rookies do over the course of their first year. No, he's not a rookie, but it's his first year. Or you can view this as a way to sell high. You can tell everyone, look at their playoff schedule. I think it depends on the price. So if you can buy Jefferson and Addison at huge discounts right now, I think their playoff schedule is enough to convince me to go out and do that. Let's talk about as well the Washington Commanders. I think Terry McLaurin is he might be on some of your waivers. You can go pick him up if Jaden Daniels comes back and they play together. He has an exciting schedule in the playoffs. Ricky Pearsall might be a really good cheap flex to buy. And then Jalen Waddle is one of my favorite buys for the playoffs as well. I love his schedule. Now, on the opposite side of the spectrum, Rashee Rice is a name that we should consider looking at our options. If you can trade Rashee Rice for one of the other top 5 elite wide receivers, maybe you think about doing that now because the playoff schedule is not very enticing. The Tampa Bay Buck wide receivers, by the way, maybe you look at pivoting. If you have an Emeka Egbuka, if we get further information on Drake London, do you pivot towards Drake London? Or do you look at another option like a Nico Collins? Just look at your options. This is another reason why I was begging you guys to trade Marvin Harrison last week after the Cowboys game, because the schedule in the playoffs is terrible. Houston is a worse matchup. He gets that in week 15 than Atlanta and Cincinnati. The Dallas Cowboy wide receivers, I wouldn't really be too concerned about. I wouldn't, really be desperate to move them off of my team. All right, let's look at the quarterback spot. The best schedule in the playoffs, Minnesota. Look, maybe in Superflex leagues, you do go buy JJ McCarthy. Not in one quarterback leagues. Same thing in Superflex leagues. Maybe you go buy Tua Tagovailoa, who has a great playoff schedule. Lamar Jackson is my favorite playoff buy. at the quarterback position. I also really like Jaden Daniels. If he's on your waiver wire, go pick him up for free because the playoff schedule alone is very, very enticing. On the opposite side of that, I'm not going to tell you to go sell Patrick Mahomes. I think the one actionable advice is if you are relying on Caleb Williams, now is the time to maybe find a different starter into the fantasy playoffs. Okay, let's go to the tight ends. I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but who have I told you guys to buy for like 3 weeks in a row? Tyler Warren. Yes, that's because every matchup in the playoffs is absolute greens. We are looking at wheels up in the playoffs. I also think that Sam Laporta, if you're already set for the playoffs, you can wait for him to come back from the IR. He's also a pretty decent buy as well. But if we look at the opposite side of that, Brock Bowers. I'm not telling you that you absolutely have to sell him, but if you can turn Brock Bowers into a Trey McBride, if you can turn Brock Bowers into a Tyler Warren plus, I think that's something that you should actionably be looking at doing today. Travis Kelce, another name that you could be looking at shopping. Dallas Goedert. So again, the more you know, the more you can be prepared for the fantasy playoffs. Now, that doesn't mean that when we look at this list, we know for certain that the guys who have good schedules are going to perform and the guys that have bad schedules won't perform. That's not the point of this video. It's all about using the information that we have to better set ourselves up in this game of luck, because ultimately it is a game of luck. Okay, what else can we do to set you up this week? Well, how about a couple players that you should sit and then a player you should start? Let's start off with the Arizona Cardinals running backs. They face the Jacksonville Jaguars, and this is just any running back, okay? I think you should sit any of them, all right? It's just a complete mess right now. The Jags are the 5th worst matchup for your fantasy running backs. They give up the 2nd fewest rushing yards per game. Only the, I believe, Patriots give up fewer. They give up just 4 yards per carry, 10th lowest in the NFL, and they allow the 12th fewest points to opposing offenses. I mean, 1 week it could be Zonovan Knight, and we've seen Zonovan Knight get into the end zone every once in a while. 1 week it could be Michael Carter. And every once in a while, you know what? Michael Carter has a fine game. Unfortunately, Amari DiMercato just went down with an injury. He might be the person that people had the most confidence in. Ultimately, I don't like the matchup. I think they're going to have to throw the ball. And I just don't know who you even trust. Even if Trey Benson is out there, I'm not really obsessed with it. So if you have the following options, I'd rather start them. I get it if you don't have a better name. But if you can rather start Ramondre Stevenson against the Bengals, David Montgomery against the Giants, Alvin Kamara, Ken Walker, or Tyrone Tracy, I would rather go that direction personally if you can. Okay, let's talk about another bench. And I'm sorry if you disagree with me. It's totally okay for you to have a different opinion, but I would be benching Daniel Jones if you have another option. We'll talk about those options in a second, but Daniel Jones this week faces the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs are the 3rd worst matchup for your fantasy quarterbacks. You know, Bo Nix was actually fine last week. We had him on this video. But look, full transparency. My real concern with Daniel Jones, yes, it's the matchup, but just hear where I'm coming from here, okay? This is the biggest test of Daniel Jones's career as a Colt thus far, playing the nasty Chiefs defense. In Kansas City, by the way, in Kansas City, at Arrowhead. I personally would rather miss out on Daniel Jones in the event that he just balls out. I just want to live with those results. I'd rather sit him, look at another option if you have one, rather than playing that game. The Chiefs defense this year gives up the 11th fewest passing yards per game, the 7th fewest total yards per game, and the 4th fewest points allowed on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, excuse me. Daniel Jones was really, really good to start the year. He was fantastic, but in the last couple of weeks, he has come back down to earth, right? For example, weeks 9 and 10, his last 2 games, you're looking at 4 interceptions and 2 passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown. So he's definitely come back to earth a little bit. I'm not completely out on him this year. It's just this matchup in particular. If you have the following names, I'd rather start them, like Joe Flacco, Jared Goff, Brock Purdy, Sam Darnold, Jacoby Brissett. I'd rather go that direction if I could. There is more than one way to play fantasy football. Each and every week, I've been setting my own DFS lineup. Here is what I'm rocking with this week. Bucky Irving at the Rams. If he doesn't play, I'll put Sean Tucker, but I'm just speaking it into life, hopefully, please. Devonta Smith against the Dallas Cowboys. Quinshon Judkins against the Raiders. Devontae Adams. Stevenson against the Bengals. I'm trying to get unique here in this contest. And Worthy against the Colts. The whole point of FastDraft's Quick 6 Super Slam is to make the most unique lineup that you think has the most potential. Whoever scores the most points ends up winning. You can set your own lineup by downloading the FastDraft app. Using my promo code LAND, I'll match your deposit up to $50, and then you'll get my weekly rankings completely free. Check that out in the pinned comment if you want to have some fun. Okay, we're gonna end off the video with my favorite start of the week. And I don't think it's a hot take. I mean, it was my hot take this week, but maybe it should be hotter. I'm thinking Derrick Henry, the king himself, puts up another 100-yard game and a touchdown against the New York Jets. The Jets in the last 4 weeks of data are the 6th best matchup for your fantasy running backs. So all the data points to a really good game for one Derrick Henry. This year, the Jets are top 10 in rushing yards allowed per game and total points allowed per game. In recent weeks, Chase Brown had a great game against them, over 6 yards per carry, 25 fantasy points. Travion Henderson had 3 touchdowns. If you look at the over-under, 44.5 points. But more importantly, the Ravens are the heaviest favorites this week. They are favored by 13.5 points, almost 2 touchdowns worth of points in Baltimore. That screams a game where Derrick Henry should be fantastic. The Ravens themselves have the 3rd highest, or tied for the 2nd highest, implied team point total on the week with the New England Patriots. And we all know Derrick Henry. All right, if you look at his career yards per carry by month, shout out to Ian Hartitz on Twitter. We all know this, but he gets better as the year goes on. As it gets colder, when winter is coming, Derrick Henry steps up like a fine wine. He ages throughout the year. So I think this is another game where he should go off. I would start him over names like Chase Brown, Quinshon Judkins, Breece Hall, Swift, Genty, and Jaylen Warren if you got him. I'm projecting 100+ yards and a touchdown. Guys, I appreciate you watching the video. Do me a favor, hit the like button to show some love. Subscribe if you like the content, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Nothing but love. Draft with me every night this week on the FastDraft app, where there are thousands of dollars to be won weekly. Getting started is easy. Download the FastDraft app. Use the promo code LAND at signup to get your deposit match up to $50. That's up to 10 free entries on us. And when you finish your first DFS contest, I'll send you my weekly rankings completely free. Check out the link in the pinned comment to start drafting today.